She moved quickly, shaking the can, and started spraying my fence. The word liar appeared in ugly, dripping red letters. Then she turned toward my porch camera, looked directly into it, and smirked. That was my breaking point. The next morning, I walked straight into the sheriff's department, handed them my phone, and played the footage. Deputy Davis's expression hardened. That's criminal vandalism and harassment, considering the history. He took notes, filed a report, and promised me they'd handle it properly this time. That same afternoon, a patrol car pulled up outside Karen's house. I stood behind my curtain, watching. She opened the door in her robe, feigned confusion. But the moment she saw the officer holding a printed still from the footage, her smile evaporated. For once, she looked scared. I figured that would finally stop her. But if I'd learned anything by then, it was that Karen's ego couldn't handle being beaten, especially not by someone she'd decided was beneath her. A few days later, I came home from work to find a for sale sign on my lawn. Not mine. Someone had planted it there, with my address, my name, and a fake phone number printed across the bottom. I stared at it for a long time, equal parts furious and impressed. She wasn't just trying to annoy me anymore. She wanted to ruin my reputation, make the neighborhood see me as unstable, and it almost worked. By the end of the week, 2 realtors had stopped by asking about the listing. One even asked if I was being forced out by the HOA. That night, I poured myself a drink, sat on my porch, and made a decision. No more reacting. It was time to finish this. I started with the paper trail. I filed a formal complaint to the state HOA regulatory board. Yes, it exists, detailing every instance of harassment, trespassing, vandalism, and property interference. I attached videos, police reports, and the local news clip. Then I contacted a friend who worked in real estate law. He helped me draft a cease and desist order, which was hand-delivered to Karen's mailbox the next day. But that wasn't all. Remember the footage of her spray painting my fence? I shared it anonymously on the neighborhood Facebook group, the same one she'd used to gossip about me months before. Within an hour, comments flooded in. Unbelievable. She's the one vandalizing property? I knew there was something off about her. And she ran the HOA. No wonder everything's falling apart. By evening, the post had over 300 reactions. Karen's reputation, already fragile, shattered completely. The next morning, I found her standing at the edge of my driveway again, but this time she wasn't angry. She looked defeated. Her eyes were red, her hair unkempt, and she held a crumpled piece of paper. "You think you've won?" she said softly. "You ruined me." I crossed my arms. "No, Karen, you ruined yourself. All I did was show people the truth." Her voice cracked. "This community was mine. I kept it perfect." I shook my head. "You kept it afraid." She stared at me for a long time, breathing heavily. Then, without another word, she dropped the paper, another fake violation notice, and walked away. I never saw her again after that. That night, I sat on my porch with my dog at my feet, the yard lights glowing soft and steady. For the first time in months, I felt peace again. But as I leaned back in my chair, I couldn't help thinking about what she'd said. "You ruined me." Maybe she was right. But I didn't regret it, because people like Karen never stop, not until someone stands up and says enough. It had been 6 quiet months since I last saw Karen. The HOA replaced her with a man named Robert, the same board member who'd once apologized to me. Under his leadership, the neighborhood finally started to feel like a neighborhood again. No surprise inspections, no gossip. Just normal people living normal lives. My fence had long been repainted, the grass had grown back, and the cameras, while still there, rarely caught more than a raccoon or a wandering cat. For the first time since moving to Maplewood, I could breathe. But peace has a funny way of getting interrupted just when you start trusting it. One late October morning, I found a small envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name printed neatly in black ink. I figured it was another realtor flyer until I opened it and saw the handwriting inside. It was Karen's. "You Don't have to hate me forever. That was the first line. The rest was shaky, uneven, written like someone struggling to find the right words. I know you probably think I'm a monster. Maybe I was. I wanted control because I felt like I was losing everything else. My husband left. My daughter stopped speaking to me. The HOA was all I had left that made me feel important, that made me feel like I mattered to someone. You took that away. But you were right to. I sat at my kitchen table, rereading the letter over and over. She didn't apologize exactly, but there was something raw about her words, like she finally understood what she'd become. I'm leaving Maplewood for good. I need to start over somewhere. I'm not the villain. I know I crossed every line, and I'll live with that. Maybe one day you'll forget the bad parts. I'll try to forget them too. At the bottom, she'd signed it simply. Karen H.I. didn't know what to feel. Anger, relief, pity, maybe all three. For a while, I just sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the old wall clock. It was strange. The silence that had once been peaceful now felt heavy. Later that week, I brought the letter to Robert. He sighed when he saw it. She sent a few of these, he said quietly. To the board, to a couple of neighbors. I think she's really gone this time. Sold her house last month. Left in the middle of the night, I nodded. Probably for the best, he gave a small smile. You handled things better than most would have. I wanted to believe that, but deep down, I wasn't sure. I'd stood my ground, yes, but I'd also played my part in her downfall. And even if she deserved it, revenge always leaves a shadow. A few weeks passed. Life went on. Then, one evening in early December, something strange happened. I was checking footage from my cameras, a routine habit by now, when I noticed movement near the back fence. It wasn't Karen. Too tall, too steady. A delivery truck? No, when I looked closer, I saw a man kneeling by the fence line, placing something on the ground. By the time I got outside, he was gone. I approached cautiously, half expecting another note. But what I found stopped me cold. It was a small wooden box, no bigger than a shoebox. My name was carved into the lid. Inside was a photo, one I'd never seen before. It was taken from across the street months ago, during the worst of it all. I was standing in my yard next to the broken no trespassing sign, looking tired, angry, human. Underneath the photo was another folded piece of paper. This time it wasn't Karen's handwriting. Karen asked me to give this to you if she ever couldn't do it herself. She passed away last month in another county. Heart failure. I'm her brother. She talked about you, not with anger, but regret. Said you were the first person who ever stood up to her. And that maybe she needed that more than she realized. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The cold air bit at my hands. But I just stood there holding that letter, staring at the photo of a version of myself I barely recognized. I wasn't sure what to feel. Guilt, sadness, relief, maybe all at once. Karen had been cruel, yes. But somewhere under all that control and arrogance had been a woman who'd lost her sense of purpose. And I had unknowingly ripped away the only thing she thought gave her meaning. I placed the photo and the letter back into the box, sealed it and carried it inside. That night, I went out to the fence one last time. The same fence that started everything. I stood there in the quiet, the autumn wind whispering through the trees, and set the box beneath the no trespassing sign. Then I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, you were right. Karen, we both needed to let go. The motion light flicked on one last time, bathing the yard in soft white glow. And for the first time since moving to Maplewood, I didn't feel watched. I just felt free. Epilogue. 6 months later, the house sold faster than I expected. I moved to a small lakeside cabin a few towns over. No HOA, no committees, no Karens. Every now and then I drive by Maplewood. The neighborhood looks peaceful now. My old fence still stands, freshly painted, and my old sign still reads, no trespassing, private property, but someone has added one more line beneath it. Neatly painted in smaller letters, respect is mutual, and for the first time, I think maybe Karen finally understood that too. Then I wrote a formal complaint, not to the HOA, but to the county sheriff's office and the community affairs division. 2 days later, a deputy knocked on Karen's door. I watched from my porch as he handed her a packet of papers. Her expression went from smug to stunned in under 3 seconds. The neighborhood was suddenly quiet. No more whispers, no more glares. That night I received a short email from Robert, the HOA board member. Mr. Miller, on behalf of Maplewood HOA, we sincerely apologize for recent incidents. President Karen has been temporarily suspended pending review. I smiled for the first time in weeks. I thought that was the end. Until I woke up the next morning to find something unexpected. In the middle of my yard, right under the motion light, was a handwritten letter. Just one sentence. You have no idea who you're dealing with. And beside it, a freshly uprooted security camera. When I saw that note, you have no idea who you're dealing with, my first reaction wasn't fear. It was anger, because up until that point I'd played fair. I'd followed the law, gathered evidence, and stayed calm. But that note meant Karen was done playing by the rules. And if she wanted war, she was about to find out what a quiet man with patience and proof could do. The next morning, I filed a harassment report with the county sheriff's office. The deputy I'd spoken with before, a calm guy named Davis, reviewed my photos, videos, and the threatening note. "You've done everything right," he said. "We'll have a patrol car swing by more often. Don't engage her directly. Let us handle it." I appreciated that, but I also knew Karen wouldn't stop until she embarrassed me publicly. That was her power source, attention. So I came up with a plan that didn't involve confrontation, only exposure. That weekend, I installed 3 new cameras, one on the porch, one on the garage, and one overlooking the backyard. They streamed directly to my phone. I even upgraded the lighting around my property, making it impossible for anyone to sneak around unnoticed. On Sunday evening, the first alert came through. Motion detected. I opened the feed, and there she was again. Karen, this time she wasn't alone. She had 2 men with her, probably her husband and a board member, and they were standing right at the edge of my property line. Pointing at my fence and talking animatedly, I hit record. Karen gestured wildly toward my sign, clearly furious. One of the men seemed reluctant. He pointed at something on his phone, probably a map. Then, to my disbelief, she stepped over the fence again. That was it. I called Deputy Davis immediately. Within 10 minutes, a patrol car pulled up, silent but swift. I watched as the officer stepped out and caught them mid-argument. Karen's confident expression vanished the moment she saw the flashing lights. I couldn't hear the conversation from where I stood, but I saw the gestures, the pointing at the fence, the papers, the obvious explaining. Eventually, the officer turned toward my house, motioning for me to come over. "Mr. Miller," he said, "can you confirm this is your property line?" I handed him the county documents. "Right here, sir." He nodded, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, you've been told before not to step onto this property." I'm issuing a formal warning for trespassing. Karen's mouth dropped open. "You can't do that. This is community land." The officer shook his head. "Not according to the county. You're lucky he's not pressing charges." Her face flushed crimson. "This isn't over," she hissed, before stomping back toward her house. I almost laughed, but something in her eyes told me this wasn't frustration anymore. It was obsession. For a few days, peace returned. No notes, no visits, no HOA inspectors. I even started to relax again. Then one afternoon, while working in the garage, I heard the faint crackle of a walkie-talkie. Curious, I stepped outside and froze. Across the street, Karen stood talking to a news crew, a camera, a microphone, and her, animatedly waving her arms toward my house. I couldn't hear every word, but the snippets made my blood boil. It was creating a hostile environment. Dangerous to the community, refuses to cooperate with neighborhood standards. She was painting me as the villain and doing it live, so I did something I knew would infuriate her even more. I walked calmly across the lawn, waved politely to the cameraman, and handed him a flash drive. "Before you air anything," I said, smiling, "you might want to check this. It's footage of her trespassing on private property, vandalizing signs, and ignoring police warnings." Everything's time-stamped? The reporter blinked. Is that true? He asked Karen. Her face went pale. That's doctored. He's manipulating things. But the cameraman was already looking intrigued. He took the drive, thanked me, and said they'd verify the material before broadcasting. Karen stormed off mid-interview, her heels clacking like gunshots on the pavement. By the next evening, the story aired, but not the way she'd hoped. The segment was titled, "Local HOA President Accused of Harassing Non-Member Homeowner." The footage they played was short but devastating. Karen sneaking around my yard with a flashlight, her fake violation notice, and the police warning her about trespassing. The community's group chat exploded that night. Screenshots started flying around. Neighbors who'd once avoided me now waved apologetically as they drove by. Karen, however, vanished. For 3 days, no one saw her outside, until the HOA held a special meeting the following Friday, and everyone in the neighborhood was invited. I decided to go, not out of curiosity, but closure. When I arrived, the community hall was packed. Karen sat at the front, red-eyed but defiant, surrounded by board members. Robert, the vice president, stood up first. "As of tonight," he announced, "Karen will be removed from her position as HOA president, effective immediately." Murmurs filled the room. Karen's mouth opened in shock. "You can't do this. I built this community." Patty, the quiet board member from before, simply said, "You destroyed its trust." For the first time since moving in, I actually felt a strange sense of pity, but only for a moment, because as I turned to leave, Karen's glare followed me, cold and sharp like a blade, and I knew deep down this wasn't the last I'd hear from her. I thought that after her public humiliation, Karen would fade quietly into the background, lick her wounds, maybe even move away. But people like Karen don't just give up. They wait. For weeks, things were calm, too calm. The kind of stillness that makes you check your locks twice before bed. Neighbors stopped talking about the news clip. Kids went back to playing in the cul-de-sac. And I finally started to enjoy my mornings again. Until one Saturday in early June. That's when the small things started happening. It began with my mailbox, torn off its post and tossed into the ditch. Then one of my tires got mysteriously slashed overnight. A few days later, my Wi-Fi cameras lost power, all at once, though the rest of the house was fine. Coincidence? Maybe, but I knew better. So I went to the hardware store again, and this time I didn't just buy cameras, I bought a full surveillance system. 4 hidden microcams disguised as solar lights, plus a new backup battery system that couldn't be tampered with from outside. I set them up that same night. 2 nights later, at 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Driveway. I opened the live feed and felt my stomach twist. There she was again. Karen. She was standing in the middle of my yard, wearing dark clothes this time, holding something shiny, a can of spray paint. The sign that started it. Or when I first moved into Maplewood Estates, I thought I had finally found peace. Quiet neighborhood, friendly faces, and a long stretch of land behind my house that opened to a small wooded area. My perfect escape from city life. I wasn't part of the HOA. My property, as clearly marked in the county records, sat just outside their official jurisdiction line. Or so I thought. For the first few weeks everything was calm. I'd mow my lawn, walk my dog, and keep to myself. But then I met Karen, the self-appointed queen of the Maplewood HOA. She walked around the neighborhood like she was conducting military inspections. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and a scowl that could curdle milk. It started small. She'd remind me about trash pickup days, even though I already knew them. She'd mention how my fence was too tall for community standards. I'd politely tell her I wasn't under the HOA. Each time, she'd smile, that tight fake smile that didn't reach her eyes, and say, "Oh, we'll see about that." A few weeks later, I began noticing footprints around the edge of my backyard, near the tree line. Someone was clearly cutting through my property to reach the main road. I didn't mind at first, but when I found trash, soda cans, cigarette butts, and even an old lawn chair dumped there. I decided enough was enough, so I went to the local hardware store, bought a clean white board, and painted big red letters on it. No trespassing, private property. I installed it near the back gate, hammered deep into the ground. It wasn't flashy or aggressive, just clear. My land, my right. The next morning, I found Karen standing there, hands on her hips, glaring at my new sign like I'd just vandalized her living room. "Excuse me," she snapped. "What is that doing there?" I looked up from my coffee cup. It's a no trespassing sign. People have been walking through my property. You can't just put up signs without HOA approval, she said, tapping her clipboard. I laughed. "Karen, I'm not in your HOA." Her eyes narrowed. "All properties within 3 blocks are under our community standards." "Not mine," I said, handing her a printed copy of my property deed.
See that?
"The HOA line stops right before my fence." She blinked, visibly annoyed. "Well, that's inconvenient." I thought that was the end of it. But 2 days later, I woke up to flashing blue and red lights outside my house. 2 police cruisers were parked on the street. My stomach dropped. Had something happened nearby? I stepped outside to see Karen standing beside one of the officers, arms crossed and smirking like she'd just won a game of chess. "That's him, officer," she said. "He's putting up illegal signage on community property." The officer turned to me, looking apologetic. "Sir, we received a complaint from the HOA president about an unauthorized sign. Can you explain?" I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. "Yes, I can. The sign is on my property, which, by the way, isn't part of the HOA." Karen scoffed. "He's lying. Everyone in this neighborhood falls under our rules. That sign violates our aesthetic policy." I motioned toward the deed again. "Officer, if you'll give me a minute, I'll show you the county line map." The officer nodded. Karen rolled her eyes. I went inside, grabbed my folder and pointed out the section showing the HOA boundary clearly ending before my backyard began. The officer studied it for a long moment, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, this property is indeed outside the HOA's jurisdiction. He's within his rights to post the sign." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But this can't be right. That's community land." The officer shook his head. "No, ma'am. That's private property. You might want to stay off it from now on." I had to bite back a grin. Karen stormed off without another word, muttering something about calling the board. As the police drove away, I thought that would be the end of it. I even felt a little bad for her, getting embarrassed like that in front of the cops. But that sympathy didn't last long, because 2 days later I woke up to find my no trespassing sign ripped out of the ground and thrown into my driveway and taped to my front door. Was an HOA violation notice. 2 mornings after the cops left, I walked out to grab the paper and nearly tripped over my own no trespassing sign. It was lying flat in the driveway. The post snapped clean in half, like someone had stomped on it in anger. Taped to my front door was an envelope stamped with the Maplewood Homeowners Association logo. Inside was a letter, bold red letters at the top, "Notice of Community Violation." "Dear resident," it began, "your unauthorized signage violates Community Policy Section 4B regarding outdoor displays. Failure to comply may result in fines up to $500 per day." I could practically hear Karen's smug tone as I read it. Except there was one problem. I wasn't a resident of the HOA. I laughed out loud, part disbelief, part fury. She'd actually forged a violation notice to scare me, so I did what any sane person would do. I took photos. The broken sign, the fake letter, even the shoe prints in the dirt that led straight from the main road to my yard. Then I called the county office. The clerk on the line, a calm woman named Janet, confirmed exactly what I already knew. "Sir, your property is completely outside the HOA boundary. They have no legal authority over you." "Perfect," I said. "Then you won't mind sending me an official letter stating that?" "Not at all," she replied. "You'll have it by tomorrow." That's when I decided this wasn't going to be another Karen gets her way story. No, this time I'd play her game, but by the book, That weekend, I replaced the sign, this time with a metal post sunk 2 feet into concrete. I added a motion light above it and a small camera tucked under the eave of my shed. Sure enough, the following night, the motion light flared on, and there she was, Karen, wearing a bathrobe, slippers, and holding a flashlight like she was sneaking into Area 51. She tiptoed up to the sign, glancing around nervously. Then she saw the camera. She froze. Blinking against the red recording light, her face caught crystal clear in the lens. I didn't say anything. Didn't even go outside. I just watched from my living room window as she turned, stiff as a board, and scurried back toward her house like a guilty raccoon. The next morning, I printed a still frame from the footage, Karen mid-sneak, flashlight in hand. I taped it to my new sign with a note, "Smile, you're on camera." By noon, I got a knock at my door. Not Karen this time, but 2 board members from the HOA. One was a tall man named Robert, clearly uncomfortable. The other was Patty, a soft-spoken woman who looked like she didn't want to be there. "Mr. Miller," Robert began, "we'd like to clear up some confusion. It seems there's been a misunderstanding about property lines." I raised an eyebrow. "A misunderstanding? Because your president sent me a fake violation letter and trespassed on my land." Patty sighed. "We didn't authorize that letter. Karen tends to act on her own." Robert nodded awkwardly. "We just want to assure you the HOA won't be pursuing any action." I folded my arms. "Good, because if she steps on my property again, I'll press charges." They exchanged looks, embarrassed, defeated, and left without another word.